Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome everyone to another CPC Strategy hosted webinar. If this is your first time with us, welcome, and we hope to see more of you at future events. If this is not your first time with us, well, welcome back, and we are happy to have you here again for another webinar. Today, we are fortunate enough to have Avalara, an e-commerce nurse, here with us, speaking on the topic, Your First Steps to Amazon's Global Marketplace, where we will be going over all the considerations, or many of the considerations, to take before expanding your Amazon business to international marketplaces. Maybe it's something you're getting ready for in 2019. So I think I might have Sam, if you want to click next for me. I would like to introduce myself to you all. I think, Sam, do you mind skipping to the next slide for me, please? I don't know if I have the best click control. Okay, great. I would like to introduce myself to you all. I'm Annalicia. I am CPC Strategies webinar coordinator, and I'll be moderating today's webinar, handling all your questions in the back end. So I want to go over a few logistics. Session recordings and slide will be sent out to you all. You should get it tomorrow, so in less than 24 hours. The recording and landing page, feel free to send that to any of your colleagues that you think might find this interesting and weren't able to attend today. Also, in the GoToWebinar panel, there's a tab that reads out questions. So that's where you submit your questions for our panelists. Feel free to send any questions you have for them that through there, or any issues you may have that we can troubleshoot together. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of our presentation, so we'll be getting to your questions then. Also, there is a tab named Handouts. So these are some additional resources from Avalara, from e-commerce nurse, and from CPC Strategy that support our presentation today, kind of some additional resources for international marketplaces. So feel free to download those as well. And then we also ask that you join in on a couple of poll questions. We'll have one just before diving into the content, and then we'll have another right before closing. But that's it for logistics. Then Sam, if you want to click next for me, I want to introduce CPC Strategy for all of you that are unfamiliar with us. We are a retail-focused digital advertising company, and we concentrate specifically in the realms of Google Shopping and paid search, Facebook performance marketing, and Amazon. We do everything from advertising to some operations, as well as creative. And we were founded in 2007 with over 500 clients at this moment. But enough about me and CPC and logistics. I would like to introduce our speakers for today. We have CPC Strategies' very own Samantha Blush, Leo Carrillo III, and then we have e-commerce nurse CEO Karina, as well as Avalara's Director of Tax Technology Solutions, Sasha Wilson. So Sam, you would like to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Annalicia. This is Sam. I'm a senior marketplace channel analyst, and I work with a couple of clients who have expanded into international marketplaces. So very excited to speak with you guys today.
Hello, everyone. Happy Hump Day. My name is Leo Carrillo. I'm CPC's Marketplace Channel Manager. My entire background is in Amazon advertising, from international to the US, where I've effectively managed over $20 million in ad spend. And today I lead a team of analysts that manage accounts. So really excited to talk about this topic today.
Hi everyone, I'm Karina. So I'm the Managing Director for e-commerce nurse and Amazon retail consultant. I'm actually an ex-Amazonian, so I spent over 7 years working for Amazon in vendor management in the UK. And then the last 6 years I've spent working as a consultant with both vendors and sellers, helping them grow their business, both in North America and Europe.
Hi everybody, Sasha Wilson here from Avalara. I look after the sales division for Avalara in Europe. We have a range of solutions to help companies navigate the complex world of tax compliance, so with regards to VAT and sales tax and duties. And so I've been doing this for 5 years. Prior to that, like Karina, I was also at Amazon. I was there from 2003 for 11 years in the seller services team. So I was on the team that helped launch Marketplace in Europe. I was on the team that launched FBA product advertising and payments. So as well as tax, I can hopefully maybe answer some questions on other bits as well.
Great, thank you so much. So I think if the next slide Sam could advance, I think it's an about Avalara. Yes. So Sasha, if you'd like to introduce, to the audience that might not be so familiar with Avalara.
Absolutely, yeah. So we are a US company that was born in 2004, based in Seattle. Since that time, it has expanded. We've got about 1,500 employees across 15 offices and 3 continents. We, at the core of our work is really trying to help companies provide, easy solutions to manage tax. So we help companies understand where they have tax obligations. We've got software that can plug into whatever systems they're using to automatically calculate the right tax, and also prepare and file those tax returns and help them get registered as well. In terms of platforms, we connect to anything from e-commerce platforms to ERPs to billing systems. We've even integrated our software, and I'll touch on that a little bit later on, into Amazon's European Seller Central, so with the default tax engine there. But essentially, all the solutions we have help companies to comply with local tax legislation, make sure that they are not at risk of fines and penalties for doing things incorrectly, and also to bring automation to a lot of processes that are generally done manually.
And a little bit about e-commerce nurse. So e-commerce nurse, we're an Amazon consulting agency as we work with both sellers and vendors in Europe and North America. So we started in 2013, and that was just me, myself, and I as the one consultant, and then have expanded over years with the growth of Amazon. And in 2017, we started growing and became a team of Amazon experts and ex-Amazonians. So we work with clients and help them manage their accounts on an ongoing basis. We also help accounts optimize their listings, run their advertising campaigns, provide consulting, any support that they need when it comes to Amazon, we provide assistance with. We also have, I also have another business, Vendor Society, as well. It's very much in the name. It's a content website available for Amazon vendors, and it's just helping Amazon vendors become self-sufficient. There's a lot of information out there, as you know, for sellers, and less out there for vendors. So hence why Vendor Society was created, to provide vendors the same level of detail that sellers have to help them grow their business on the Amazon platform.
Great, thank you so much for those introductions. So next, I will be briefly reviewing just the agenda before we jump in. So we will be going over the benefits and challenges of Amazon's international expansion. Our focus primarily on European expansion. Some key differences among these foreign marketplaces, some first steps to selling internationally, an overview of Amazon's global selling program, just reviewing international value added and sales taxes, as well as closing out with some advertising tips, and of course, leaving some question for Q&A. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll question before we begin. This is really just to gauge an idea of who is in our audience today. So the poll question is, are you currently selling in Amazon European markets? Options being yes, no, but you plan on expanding into Europe in 2019. And lastly, not sure if you're ready to take the plunge. So I'll leave that poll question up for a few more seconds. But thank you for everyone for participating. I will go ahead and close the results now and share them with everyone. So the majority, that's 39%, is not yet selling, but they plan on expanding into Europe in 2019. 37 is the second biggest majority, not sure if you're ready to take the plunge. And then 24 is yes, that they're already selling in Amazon European marketplaces. So again, thank you everyone for participating. I know our speakers will add great value, whether you're just looking to expand next year or whether you already are. And so I'll go ahead and close that, and I'll let Karina kick it off.
Great, thank you. So if we move on to the first slide, it's more about why expand into Europe. Now, looking at the poll, there's around 37% that are still unsure. So really, I'm just going to briefly highlight the main benefits as to why into Europe. And the main reason is, of course, being able to access more new customers, millions of new customers. In fact, they said in Europe, I read an article that said over 340 million online buyers. There was online buyers in Europe in 2018, and that's a similar size to the US. So whilst each country within Europe the market is a lot smaller, if we look at Europe as a whole, it's actually a really sizable chunk of business and opportunity out there for a number of businesses. And what that means is if you sell into Europe, you can then sell into 5 marketplaces: the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And also your products are then available to the 28 European Union countries as well. And one of the key things, and one of the real key benefits here, is the fact that the markets are less saturated. So if a number of you are already selling on the US, you're probably finding it's an aggressive playing field, especially when you're in Q4. It's a huge amount of competition. There's private people and go over to Europe, partly because it is a less saturated market. And of course, if you decide to go ahead and sell into Europe via FBA, you'll also see that actually to trial out and see if there's demand for your products in Europe, it does actually require a limited investment as well, which is definitely an incentive. But of course, all these benefits, and it's fantastic being able to go out and hit millions of new customers, but that of course comes with a number of challenges. So if we move over to the next slide, I'll then go through the challenges that a number of you will need to consider when expanding into Europe. So firstly, it's the obvious one when it comes down to language. And when we talk about language, we're talking about product content, the product listings, as well as the packaging and the instructions that goes with the product, and customer service. There's lots of different elements there when we talk about language. And very much one key rule here is when selling into Europe is not to assume that everyone speaks English. Even in Germany, Germans speak fantastic English, but there is still that expectation that if you want to sell in a specific marketplace, that you need to make sure that you are speaking in that local language. And even that's the same with the US to the UK. It's making sure that American English goes over to British English, Latin American Spanish over to Castilian Spanish, and so forth. So even if you're thinking of going into the UK, there isn't that language barrier as such. There still is an element of translation that needs to happen. I have had experiences in the past where a client has come to me and they've had a lot of negative product reviews in other marketplaces such as France and Italy. And the reason why they had so many negative reviews was down to not having the instructions in that language. It was in English, and it actually to some extent offended those in that marketplace, as well as that it wasn't any use because not everybody speaks English. And so those are things that you definitely need to contemplate to ensure not only will it help sell, but also to ensure that you are offering that positive customer experience. And so really the plan of action there is to make sure that you work with translators and native translators. I recommend avoiding computer-based translations. Yes, they work, but they're not 100% accurate. And if you want to maximize your potential within that market, then you want to do it right. And doing it right means getting a native translator to translate your content for you. But that then brings us on to the next challenge, which is localization. It's all well and good translating your content, but it doesn't just stop there. Translating content doesn't mean that it's necessarily then going to be appealing to that audience. You will need to then start localizing that and adapting that content once it's been translated, hence why we say a native translator, to make sure that it then appeals to that specific marketplace as well. To make sure again that you are maximizing your potential and getting the best conversion rate possible, and also ensuring that you're not missing out on some keywords that might have been not necessarily translated or that came into the text that was being translated from. And so not only should you be translating, but it's also localizing all content as well as things such as metrics. So in metrics in the US, you talk about inches. In Europe, we talk more about centimeters. So also taking those points into consideration as well. Then moving on, there's product compliance, and this is quite a meaty chunk and kind of one of those that not the probably least exciting of it all, and something that sometimes sellers like to avoid, not necessarily want to avoid, but it's too much to understand and think, oh well, we'll find out if our products run into any issues once we're selling in Europe. And that's definitely not the way to go. You want to make sure that you are aware of everything. You're aware of any country specific laws. You're also aware of any EU directives that might apply to your products, such as in Europe, they have a WE legislation, which is basically talks about how you need to dispose of electronics. We also, in some product categories such as toys and health products, you need to make sure that you have the correct CE marking, which basically is a certification mark that indicates that the product conforms with health and safety. EU labeling, the EU is quite strict when it comes to in the US, especially when it comes to products such as food supplements and toys. We also have, there's the competitive laws, competition law, as in MAP policies, etc., are seen as anti-competitive in Europe and so don't apply. So there's lots of different things there, and it's not to sort of scare you and think, oh, just talked loads about EU laws and that we're going to steer away from it. It's about making sure that you're aware of it, and if you are aware of it, does it apply to your products? And if it does, then making sure that you are following those rules. You definitely don't want to cut corners here. It's about making sure you're being diligent, and there are companies that can support you in that. It's not that you necessarily have to go and do all that reviewing. And then lastly, there's the second from last is logistics. It's about, you've got the cost of international shipping, the cost of customs duty, the import VAT, and also understanding how you want to actually handle those orders. And we're going to be talking about that in the next slide. So really what you want to do if you're going to be selling into Europe is finding a freight forwarder that can manage everything, basically from your warehouse right to Amazon's fulfillment center. And that is the ideal situation, and they can handle all customs on your behalf. And then finally, another challenge is then sales tax. And I won't go into that, VAT. But really the key there is, again, as I said, about being diligent. It's about understanding your obligations and making sure that you are doing everything to the book legitimately. If you don't, you might find that your product listings suspended or your account suspended if you don't adhere to anything when it comes to compliance in Europe. So as I mentioned, I was talking about deciding how to handle orders. So if we move over to the next slide, this then highlights the different fulfillment methods. So I've spoken about the different challenges and how you need to just be aware of all of those and your plan of action. But then it's about deciding how you then want to sell within Europe. And whilst in the US, if we use US for example, very much it's about being seller fulfilled or fulfillment by Amazon. In Europe, there are actually 3 different types of FBA programs that you can actually sign up to. One is the European Fulfillment Network, And basically, the European fulfillment network is when you decide to hold inventory in one marketplace. So let's use the UK as an example. But you still sell your products on Spain, Italy, France, Germany. And then you start, when a customer places an order on the site in Germany, Amazon then fulfill that order from that pool of inventory in the UK. That's a great way that's a very popular way of working for businesses starting out in Europe, because it's a great way to test the water. You're just working really with one marketplace. Products become Prime eligible in the UK and in all other EU accounts. But the only downfall is the longer shipping time. So it's going to the product. So we're talking about around 3 to 5 days as opposed to guaranteed delivery. And then, of course, Amazon adds on some cross-border fees because, of course, there's an additional cost there with shipping products over to another country. But that is definitely a popular method. And there's also VAT, sales tax obligations, when it comes to defining what fulfillment method you want to go ahead with. And I'm going to leave all of that, the VAT side of things, for Sasha. We'll be talking about that in later slides. So that's the EFN. We then have the Pan-European FBA, and Pan-European FBA is basically when you have, you send your inventory to one location. We could send it again to the UK. And what Amazon then does is they then redistribute that inventory to all other countries based on their system, their intelligent system that understands local demand for your product. They'll redistribute that inventory accordingly. And that's fantastic. That means products are Prime eligible, fast delivery, they're close to all the customers in every single country, so you don't have also these cross-border fees. But there are the biggest issue there is when it comes to sales tax and VAT, which again we'll talk about in more detail shortly. So often Pan-European seems appealing at the start, but when you start understanding your VAT obligations, sometimes that can be a turn-off. So it's more often what we find is that the smaller businesses want to test the water with EFN, and then larger businesses that might already have some kind of setup in Europe decide then to go with Pan-European. So every model, every program really depends on your business setup and the size of your company. And then there's multi-country inventory, and that's kind of a mix between the two. You might decide that you don't want your inventory in Italy, Spain, and France, but you want it in the major markets, the largest markets in Europe, Germany and the UK. And so you send inventory to both of those countries. That means your products are close to the customer in the UK, Prime eligible, well, they're Prime eligible in all countries, but they're also closer to the customer in Germany. So you don't have cross-border fees in those countries. But then if you then decide that you're also selling in France and Italy and Spain, you then have a slightly longer lead time for those markets and cross-border fees. But the sales are so might be a lot lower that you're not necessarily concerned about those about those additional cross-border fees. So a mix of the two. And lastly, which you guys will be familiar with. And there's two methods really with seller fulfilled. There's you could sell products directly from the US, although I definitely would steer away from that. It's low cost, but the customs delay and the long shipping times just is almost a big no-no when it comes to customer experience and getting those negative seller feedback and negative reviews. So if you are thinking about seller fulfilled, it's more seller fulfilled from the EU. The good thing is you don't have those FBA fees, but you do want to find a really good logistics partner to handle that if you don't have your own, and possibly one that already can already handle the option of seller fulfilled as a seller fulfilled Prime as well. So those are all the different options available that you need to consider. And as I said, there are other things that I haven't mentioned when it comes to VAT, which we'll talk about shortly. But before I start to close, there are a couple of other things that you need to consider when it comes to the selling program. And if we move over to the next slide. On to the next slide. Can we move over to this? Sam, can you switch us over to the next slide, please? Okay, I think we're stuck on this slide at the moment. So, okay, there's a couple of other things that we need to consider. And the other things that we need to consider are customer support. So with customer support, that basically means that if you decide to sell fulfillment by Amazon, then it means that Amazon will be able to handle any customer queries that come around orders and everything in each of those different marketplaces, which is fantastic. But if you decide to go seller fulfilled, or you do have the odd query that comes from a customer that isn't about your order, you need to be prepared that you can actually respond to those customers in their local language. And so it's good to have somebody there on standby that can manage it. There are people that use Google, but again, if you really want to provide your customers with excellent customer service, you really want to think about having somebody on standby that can help you if, for example, you have a customer query that wasn't fielded via FBA that you need to respond to. Another thing is product returns. And so with product returns, you do need to have a returns process in place in that marketplace where inventory is stored. Now, you could decide that it might be a low retail item, it might not be of high value, that you just want to dispose of it, which is fine. But you might actually want to receive your returns back. Now, Amazon won't be returning that stock back to, for example, the US. They will need to return it within that country where you have that inventory stored. And so what that means is there are third-party companies. Again, there's a third-party company out there for every solution when it comes to Amazon. And so you will find that you have a company available there that will be able to manage and handle those returns for you as well. And lastly, then there's international payments. So we do need to factor in that there are costs when it comes to foreign exchange, because of course selling in Europe, you're going to be offering your products in euros, and in the UK in pound sterling. And so there are costs there. Now, there are companies out there. One example is OFX.com, who manage this on behalf of businesses. And what it means is, yes, Amazon can manage this and deposit the money into your account, but there comes some larger fees. And if you want to cut down on those costs, you can use external third-party companies that will save you that time and money on international transfers. So if we can move over to the last slide, Sam. If we go to the next one.